I feel for the kids in the school and the university students that there's so much pressure on them to achieve academically, but nobody's teaching them how. Society, as I said at the very start, and education is teaching us how to think, but it's not teaching us how to stop thinking. We need to be able to develop mastery over our own mind. We can do that through the breath, but change the respiratory physiology first. Alter the autonomic nervous system. Don't do what mindfulness says. Don't leave it alone. No, change your breath.
I'm Ranjor, and this is Remake, a podcast about design, systems, and society. In each episode, I talk to someone who's trying to change our lives for the better in some meaningful way, whether through a new product, new venture, or a new way of looking at the world. And I try to understand how they came to it, what makes them tick, and what we can learn from them. Patrick McKeown is the best-selling author of The Oxygen Advantage and the clinical director of the Buteyko Clinic International. Over the past 2 decades, Patrick has trained thousands of people around the world to safely challenge their bodies and produce positive changes through correct breathing. He's widely regarded as one of the world's leading breathing re-education experts. In this conversation, we discuss his childhood struggles with asthma, sleep, and concentration at school, his discovery of the Buteyko technique and the power of nose breathing, his trip to the USSR to learn the techniques from Professor Buteyko himself, who discovered them, and his belief that everyone should be taught foundational breathing techniques which can help reduce fatigue, increase focus and concentration, reduce risk of injury and disease, and increase resilience. This conversation has already changed the way I breathe and has improved my sleep and my resilience after public speaking noticeably. I hope it can help you think about the breath, this most fundamental cycle of our lives, more deeply. So let's jump right in with Patrick McKeown. All right. I'm sitting here across the screen from Patrick McKeown. So Patrick, welcome to the podcast.
Good to be here. Thanks very much, Aaron.
So I like to start these days by, even though we're at the tail end of COVID in most places, just asking how you're doing where you are, what's the situation there, and how has it affected your work?
In many ways, it's improved it. Before that, I was doing a lot of travel. I was constantly going from place to place. And when March of 2020, of course, all of that stopped. My last trip was coming in from Los Angeles, and that was on March the 17th, 2020. So since between that now and then, I've only done one trip. So for me, the reset has been absolutely tremendous and much needed. Yeah. And I'm sure it's the same for many people. I understand that some people are having a hard time through it, but there has been some positives from it as well. Now, I'm fortunate. The work has really taken off in the last few years. It's been very busy, but you know what? Sometimes there's a balance, and it's not all about being stuck in an airplane somewhere.
Yeah, I think I miss the time alone that COVID allowed us. I've been traveling now. I'm in New York now, where I spent COVID in Tel Aviv. And it's definitely something very precious about it that we could lose very quickly. We could, if we step into the world too quickly.
Yeah, it's going back to, straight away I'm seeing it. When I just looked at my calendar there today, and we were deciding on dates for Holland, I'm saying, November is already pretty much booked out. September is booked out. October is booked out. So I think it's gone back to madness again. So this is a personal choice. You're always trying to balance it. You're trying to balance and getting the work out, and then you're balancing your own personal life too. And it's a logistics that pretty much anybody who's involved with small business or medium-sized business will have to contend with.
Yeah. But one thing that I think is a happy outcome of this, and of course, it's a tragic situation in many parts of the world and for many people. But I think for many people now, remote is going to be an option. We don't necessarily the default is not necessarily let me fly there. People know how to use Zoom now everywhere, and people know that it's a possibility. So for me, I'm hoping that I'll be able to maintain a lower level of travel. Because I used to fly around to do projects, and now at least some of the projects are considering remote. It's good. It's good to hear that you've mostly had not a terrible experience with it. So as a way into the subject, I like to get to know the person a little bit. And we found this question that I think works to start the journey, which is, what's something that you've learned early in life as a child or early in life that still drives you today, that still is still with you, is still guiding you? Questions.
Yeah, I learned one thing, and I felt right about it, that I never wanted to work for anybody else, that I was always going to choose my own path. And it's always worked out that way. I started working for myself back when I was about 26 years of age, and I'm almost 50 years of age now. And I've been lucky enough that I've been able to continue on this path, and it's been wonderful. It's not going to suit everybody, but that's just something for me. The work in breathing is not necessarily the greatest commercial venture ever to go into, and I can absolutely assure you that. For a few years, it was pretty tough. But then again, in terms of calm states and in terms of bringing a quietness and stillness in the mind, going through a tough time as well, it can give you quite a bit of strength and resilience in dealing with stress.
Yeah. So what made you decide that you're never going to work for anyone? Because I remember thinking this way, but not quite making a solid decision until much later in life.
I made a decision, Aaron. There was no going back. That was it. I was working for a company called Enterprise Rent-A-Car, which is an American multinational. I absolutely hated it, to be honest with you. I know it's not PC to say that about any workplace, but I did hate it. And I hated the pressure that was put on employees, that you were almost indoctrinated into this specific theme in a corporate culture. I didn't like that. I didn't like the fact that everything was controlled so rigidly, that there wasn't any room for creativity, that you were brought in when you were a young kid so that you could be molded and shaped. And I like honesty. When I'm dealing with people, I'm pretty much upfront and straight about it. I don't tell them one thing and underneath it all, there's a different motive or objective. So in terms of corporations, and the idea is by very intelligent people who are heading these and in top management, they can often have objectives for their employees, but they don't necessarily cultivate, or they don't necessarily, they promote the objective, they sugarcoat it, they show the positives without them. And it's almost like it's tricking young employees. So yeah, that's just, and I understand, listen, some people are suitable to working for themselves and some people aren't. I wouldn't have gone on working for anybody else. I'm my own person. And it's not about the money. I had only one thing in life. My one thing in life was to be financially secure and not to have to worry about paying a mortgage or if a dishwasher broke down or something like that. And that's been always the way. But I didn't want to have stress over money. And I didn't want to get into stress over making money. Because what good is it if you're making millions of dollars and if you're stressed up to the eyeballs and you're just not enjoying it? What good is it?
Yeah. Yeah, those are good insights to have as a young person. And yeah, I definitely feel like there's something maybe fundamentally unhealthy in this kind of employer-employee relationship. And I now have sort of employees. I mostly work with freelancers. When I had a full-time employee, it was like when I would see them, I would be like, do your own thing. Like, why are you looking for me for all the answers in your life? And it's almost, it feels unhealthy. Yes, I'm paying you to do this thing, but I don't want to be your parent. I don't want to be live your life. And so it's a really interesting relationship. And I think it's going through disruption now. So.
Yeah, I think so. And I think as well, the millennials as well I know the word is often bandied about, that they realize that there's more to it than working 12 and 14 hours a day and being constantly switched on and available through text messaging and social media and everything else, And I think that's positive. It's going through change. Yeah. And I'm not sure if it's all good, but there will be some good out of it.
Yeah, that's for sure. And so one of the things that you've spoken about your childhood is that you've had asthma for your whole life. And talk about that a little bit. What was that like?
Yeah, I think it's many kids have it. Of course, I'm not unique. And many adults have it. It's fairly common. Chest tightness is not a nice feeling. Constantly wheezing is not a nice feeling. And it's not just that your breathing is affected. Your sleep is affected. So if you have asthma, which is inflammation of the lungs. That problem with the lower airways can travel up to the upper. So I had a stuffy nose, which is very common. And I had always got nasal problems, always did. So rhinosinusitis issues. And with that, your sleep is impacted. So when I was in school, I was falling asleep in secondary school. That's high school. I'd be falling asleep. I had poor concentration because of sleep disorder breathing, which was undiagnosed. And I really feel that the tools and traits that are so essential to leading a productive and fulfilled life, two of those states are concentration and attention span. And concentration is your ability to hold your attention on one thing. And your attention span is the length of time that you can hold your attention on one thing. But I had lousy sleep and I had lousy breathing patterns. And I'm going to say this, you don't achieve flow states with poor sleep and poor breathing. Mindfulness is one thing, but mindfulness is not cutting it for me. I love Vipassana. It's great stuff, but it's really falling short. You bring in somebody with anxiety and a racing mind with dysfunctional breathing and poor sleep, and you can ask them to do all of the mindfulness in the world. They're going to find it most challenging. So the group of people who find it the most challenging are going to be that group with anxiety. And if we look at the anxiety population, 75 to 80% of people with anxiety have dysfunctional breathing. Mindfulness is not addressing and changing respiratory physiology. Now, when I look at it, I've just written a new book, which I'm just in the last stages of editing. And it's specifically about concentration and focus. So here are two states that society is demanding. The young child in school, it's demanded that they can focus and concentrate. The teenager in high school, the university student, the corporate worker, the sports person, the person in military and first responders, it's demanded that they can place their undivided attention on what they are requested to place it upon, but nobody is teaching them. How on earth can we grade children as being academically competent? How on earth can we grade them as being intelligent unless we are teaching them the tools necessary to achieve that academic achievement?
Right.
I was not a stupid kid in school. I was very bright in primary school. I was top of the class. I went from top of the class to the bottom of the class when I was about 11 and 12 years of age because of sleep disorder breathing. Doctors weren't seeing it. Nobody was telling me about it. I was a chronic mouth breather, and I'm not alone. There's thousands and thousands of people. You'll have your entrepreneurs listening to this, and they'll have sleep problems, insomnia, snoring, obstructive sleep apnea, and mouth breathing, waking up with a dry mouth in the morning, waking up feeling lousy. And then you're supposed to go in and do a day's work, and you're supposed to make high-level decisions in that state of fatigue. Not going to happen. It can happen, but it's not ideal. It's really, society has overlooked some of the most basic things. And they have overlooked for the anxiety population, for people prone to panic disorder, for people prone to respiratory issues, for females due to hormonal changes, because during the monthly cycle, there's an increase in progesterone and estrogen during the mid-luteal to follicular phase. And this absolutely impacts their breathing and performance and fatigue and panic, etc. So, yeah, I think the breath is the application that we can voluntarily control it and we can help to improve in these states. And going back to, I read this in a newspaper article back in 1997, and that night I taped my mouth closed. So I taped my mouth closed to force myself to breathe through my nose that night. And I woke up the first morning, getting used to it. I can't say I noticed much of a difference in the first morning, but I kept nasal breathing on the second day. And I kept my mouth closed and taped up that day, the second night. And I woke up in the morning, it was the best night's sleep I had in 15 years. Now, why didn't somebody say that to me? Do you know that 50% of the adult population persistently mouth breathe during their sleep? Why are they not told to get their mouths closed, to breathe through the nose? It reduces snoring, reduces the risk of sleep apnea, reduces insomnia. You have a deeper sleep. You're more refreshed, more alert. It's not happening.
Yeah, that's people take breath for granted, it seems.
Yes, but they all have their own ideas about the breath, and it's all a closed shop. If you look at people who are teaching breathing, there's a guru. You've got this guy or gal, and they're the guru everybody is listening to. Forget about the guru, because A guru is imposing constraints. And I know you said you were a fan of Vipassana and SN Goenka. Tremendous. But what's the first thing that SN Goenka says about the breath? Don't change the breath. And I'm saying, do change the breath. Because if you have pretty lousy breathing, you need to change your breathing and to get out of that faster and upper chest breathing. And yes, some guy might say to me, well, you keep on doing Vipassana, your breath will change by itself. It might, but it's going to take a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I've been a lot of the when I read some of your descriptions of the proper breath, it immediately resonated. It immediately brought up meditative experiences that I've had. I know what this breath is like. This is when I'm deepest into meditation. It almost naturally happens this way, but I haven't experienced it until maybe a year into it. And here you just say, just do it like this. And 5 minutes later, you're already breathing differently. And it has all of these effects. So it's really interesting. So you said you discovered, so you must have been in some sort of search when you read that article. You must have been trying things and actively searching for solutions. So tell me a little bit about that period right before you found.
Like I mentioned that I was in the corporate world, and even in university, I always had a hard time concentrating. And I also felt that there was something missing, but I wasn't quite sure what it was. I didn't know what it was, but I felt there was something not quite right. You know, I was looking to try and address my asthma because the medication that I was taking was getting more and more. But then it just, by chance, I just read a newspaper article. That was it. Like, I was just reading the newspaper and the article was there and I read it. And it was a couple of months later, I read something similar. So I didn't even act on the first one, but I got a couple of pieces of information together. And that's when I decided to try the exercises. Like, my nose was stuffy. And I did a simple nose unblocking exercise, which involves taking a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose and pinching your nose with your fingers and just holding your breath and nodding your head up and down as you hold your breath until you feel a relatively strong air hunger. Then letting go of your nose, breathing in through it. I did that a few times. My nose freed up. So I knew there was something in it then. And I think that's about the thing about breathing, that if I'm making a presentation to people, I'll say to them, listen, this is what you can do with a few simple breathing exercises. You can open up your nose. You can also help open up your lungs. You can improve your blood circulation. So it's very common for people with poor breathing to have cold hands and cold feet. And cold hands and cold feet signify that the blood vessels are constricting. And when you start paying attention to your breathing, the airflow coming in and out of your nose, the slightly colder air coming in, the warmer air leaving, and you start slowing down the speed of the breath, and slowing down the speed of the breath in, that it's almost imperceptible, and having a relaxed and a slow and gentle exhalation. So you're breathing in a really light and soft, gentle breath coming into your nose, and an almost completely and relaxed and passive exhalation. And you're doing that for about 3 or 4 minutes. And your objective is to create a feeling that you would like to take in more air. Within about 3 to 4 minutes, you will have increased watery saliva in the mouth. You'll tend to feel drowsy, and you'll start to notice that your hands are getting warmer. Now, that's a very simple exercise that we do to downregulate. So you can imagine the number of people that they can't switch off before going to sleep. They're overstimulated. Go, 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 go. And even people in the corporate world, is there a 90-second reset? Yes, there is. If you're feeling stressed, take out 90 seconds because it's probably the best thing that you can do. Yeah. Hyperventilation is a common form of breathing pattern disorders. And there was a podcast by Dr. Rangan Chatterjee. He's a UK well-known doctor in the United Kingdom. He was interviewing a brain surgeon. And the brain surgeon spoke that if he gets into a tricky situation in the operating theatre, the brain surgeon makes sure that he doesn't hyperventilate. Now, here's a doctor who understands physiology and, of course, breathing. And he purposely reduces and slows down his breathing to counter the effects of hyperventilation. And his colleagues say that he has got nerves of steel. And all he's tapping into is he understands how the body works. When we get stressed, we typically will breathe harder and faster in response. And what that is doing is reducing blood flow and oxygen delivery to the brain. It's putting us into that fight or flight response. And a fight or flight response, you're not concerned about making these very important decisions. All you want to do is get the hell out of there. That's what the fight or flight response is. So we're reacting the same way today as we did throughout our evolution, because throughout our evolution, it's a relatively long period of time. In other words, the modern life is a very brief period of time when you were to look at the timeline of our evolution. And there's no way on earth that we could adapt so quickly to keep pace with trends in modern development. And I'll go one step further. If you have good breathing, your resilience to stress is much better anyway. If you think of, I'll just look at this. Students that were doing an exam in music and they had to perform, and their breathing was monitored before taking the exam. And pretty much all of the students, their breathing became faster and shallow before taking the exam. But the students with the most anxiety, their breathing became more fast and more shallow than the rest of the students. Now, again, are those students, are they going to perform as well in their exam? And it's not taken into account. Their ability to perform is going to be negatively influenced by their stress handling ability. And their stress handling ability should be nothing got to do with their ability to perform music. But the stress handling ability, these kids haven't been told. They haven't been taught. Like kids going into exams, those kids going in with anxiety. People going in to make a presentation, public speak, and you're getting up in front of an audience that could be 200, 300, 400 people. How do you change states there so that you can have optimum flow state going out with your attention simultaneously moving in time, that you're giving an effortless presentation? You don't need backup slides or any of that nonsense. You can go out and stand on stage and you can look into the eyes of your audience. And you don't need a PowerPoint, because the PowerPoints, all they are is a big distraction. Your audience they're half asleep looking up at a PowerPoint. It's almost that they're hypnotized by the PowerPoint. Instead, the speaker needs to engage the audience, get the PowerPoint out of the way. There should be nothing brighter than the speaker on stage. The speaker should be the bright light, not the PowerPoint.
Interesting. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. But so I want to hear, because I read that you traveled to Russia to actually study with this Professor Buteyko.
Yes.
I would love to hear a little bit about that. The story of what made you go there. What was it like to work with someone who I'm assuming maybe isn't a native English speaker? And what was it like and what made you do something crazy like that at a young age?
Well, it was his technique that he developed. His name was K.P. Buteyko, Buteyko. And it's remarkable that in terms of Soviet Russia, there are some amazing scientists who come out of Russia. Amazing. And his whole premise was that when he was working with sick patients, he asked the question, what's causing these people to be sick? And why, when they get sick, why is their breathing become faster and harder? So he asked the question, was it their sickness which caused their breathing to become faster and harder? Or was it their faster and harder breathing that fed into their sickness? So he started teaching them how to reduce and slow down the respiratory rate, breathe through the nose, relax the diaphragm. And I felt, why not go to the source? One of the things that I've always tried to aspire to in life, that if I'm trying to do something, I try and go to the best within my limits, within my whatever limits there are. In university, I went to what was considered the best university in Ireland, even though it might not necessarily be, but university called Trinity College in Dublin. When I was going to teach or learn breathing, I wanted to go as much to the source as I could, because oftentimes there's information that can be transmitted that you get from other sources. Yeah. And this man was elderly now when I went over 83. So I suppose it wasn't the ideal time. I got to him in his latter stages because he passed on the following year. But at the same time, I think there was a really nice connection. The fact that I got there. And yeah, we had an interpreter. And again, not ideal because some information can get lost in translation. Breathing exercises, I did get the breathing exercises and I started teaching them. And you learn just as much by teaching the exercises as you do during your training. And in actual fact, you learn 10 times more in the teaching of the exercises. So, here's a man that's obviously a deep thinker. And I think he made a remarkable discovery, even though he based it on the science of carbon dioxide, which, science has moved on a little bit. But if you look at heart rate variability now and the baroreflex, he really hit on the money here, because what he was saying is that you can influence your autonomic nervous system and you can help to improve states of health. And the research on heart rate variability over the last 30 years has pretty much confirmed what he said. And he said it 60 years ago, 70 years ago.
Yeah. Interesting. So tell me about this method. You called it Buteyko method, but it sounds like it kept evolving, and you kept evolving it as you were teaching and as, with new science. What is this method in general? What does it consist of?
Well, it's two things. He said, breathe through your nose, in and out, continuously. During sleep, during physical exercise, during rest. He said that. I haven't ever heard anybody else saying that to the extent that he said it. And the next thing he said, that many people overbreathe. They breathe too much air. Now, if you think of, go down to your local studio and you might have an instructor teaching breathing, and you might hear the instruction, now what I'd like you to do is start filling your lungs from the lower and out to the middle, and you're listening to people and you hear them breathing inside in the studio. He was saying to do the complete opposite. Breathe less air, and breathe less air to reduce the ventilatory response to carbon dioxide. And when you breathe less air, you improve your blood flow, you improve your oxygen delivery, you help to open up the airways, you activate the body's relaxation response. And it was true. And I'm not saying go around all day deliberately breathing less air, no. But what I'm saying is choose specific pockets of time during the day that you deliberately underbreathe and that you feel air hunger. And that air hunger then is helping to reduce the sensitivity of your body to carbon dioxide. But that air hunger is also stimulating the vagus nerve. So that air hunger, which signifies that carbon dioxide is increased in the blood, stimulates the vagus nerve, which secretes the neurotransmitter acetylcholine, which causes a slowing of the heart, which helps to improve the balance in the autonomic nervous system to optimize heart rate variability. So the other aspect then is breath holds. And this would be, say, for example, you take a normal breath in through your nose, you pinch your nose and hold your nose, and you walk around or even go for a jog with your breath held. And do that to the point of a relatively strong air hunger, then let go, but get your breathing under control and have normal breathing for a minute and do it again. So on one hand, it was about improving your everyday breathing patterns. And there was a measurement that I used called the control pause. And the control pause is the length of comfortable breath hold time taken during rest. And if you have a low control pause, you typically have faster upper chest breathing. And if you're faster in upper chest breathing, you're less resilient, you're less ability to handle stress. Your sleep is more likely to be impacted because if you're breathing hard and fast, you're more likely to experience insomnia or snoring or sleep apnea. And then we went one step further in 2014. I was giving courses on functional breathing and mindfulness. Sorry, this was 2010. So Ireland was in a bad position. Our banks had made a total mess. Our politicians had made an even bigger mess. And there were a lot of people in their 30s and 40s with massive loans and mortgages that they weren't able to pay. And there was a lot of anxiety because of the financial disregard of idiots at the helm. And I'd say no other word. These extroverts, the high risk takers, who have little disregard for the people underneath. But in any event, I gave these courses and I put them out and they were quite popular. About 3,000 people attended. No, not nobody, but very few men attended. Very few men. I'd say 95% were females. And normally with Vipassana, it's very much a 50-50 in any of the courses that I've done, the 10 days of Noble Silence. But bringing together functional breathing and mindfulness wasn't working. It wasn't working in terms of the man attending. Lots of females attending, great. So I set up the Oxygen Advantage. I wanted to have a breathing technique that encompassed high performance. And it was aimed at disrupting homeostasis, pushing the boundaries, stressing the body. So on one hand, we look to improve everyday breathing patterns from 3 dimensions. We use the biochemistry taken from the Buteyko method. We look at breathing exercises to improve the biomechanics with optimal amplitude of the diaphragm. And we bring in cadence breathing, changing the respiratory rate down to between 4.5 and 6.5 breaths per minute to help improve sympathavagal balance. And then we do stressor exercises. And stressor exercises either involve hyperventilation or breath holding or both. But we are more, in terms of doing the stressor exercises, we grade the exercises more to suit the person. We don't want to stress a person to the point that we overdo it. Many people overdo it. And people who are very prone to hyperventilation syndrome are perfectionist tendencies and sometimes to put in too much effort. So it's not about pushing the boundaries to the point of extreme. It's about challenge, but it's not about extremes. So, the thing about breathing is then we can have a graded approach in terms of the exercises. And the oxygen advantage has become popular with sports and military, first responders, police. And very often, you would think that a soldier or a police person, that they have got a tremendous coping ability. But of course, they're as vulnerable as anybody else. And even though, despite their training, they're often in hypervigilance, they can't switch off, their sleep is messed up, and they're just as prone to stress. In actual fact, their stress levels can be quite high, and they don't have the tools to necessarily downregulate. And that's a problem because that's when mistakes are being made. So I wanted to have a breathing technique. The thing about breathing is that traditionally it's always been taught according to traditions. And I wasn't going to change the Buteyko method because I didn't develop the method. But I could not change it because that's a tradition. That's the way it is. But with the oxygen advantage, I have no constraints. And it has evolved. And now we encompass hyperventilation. We also encompass hypoventilation. We do breath holding, slow breathing, light breathing, deep breathing. So we do about 26 different breathing exercises. And that's the beauty about the breath, that number one is it's not a one size fits all. And number two, when you delve into the application or the potential of breathing exercise, it's amazing. It really is.
Yeah, there seems to be very few things that are as fundamental and affect every cell in the body, and very quickly too.
Yes.
It makes a lot of sense to me. So I want to understand maybe a little bit better the criticism of how we breathe in modern life, or how we normally breathe. What's wrong with it? And what's the cost of not breathing well? And why it seems like something that we should have evolved to do. Why are we not breathing correctly?
We have evolved to do it right, but we're not living. Can you say that today we are living according to how we've evolved to live? When mindfulness was developed, when was it developed? 2,000 years ago? Do you think life was different back then than it is today? Maybe mindfulness worked quite well then. Is it going to work just as well today? So today we've got, number one is people talk a lot, which is going to impact their breathing. How many occupations are involving people talking all day? And people who talk for a living, how tired are they at the end of the day's talking? Because talking is causing the respiratory rate to get faster and the tidal volume, which is the volume of each breath, to get a little bit bigger. So talking can cause overbreathing. Stress, the chronic stresses, the corporate world, the reaching targets, the pressure that people can be under, the financial stresses, marital stresses, societal stresses. There really is something. And the whole thing about social media as well, you've got a psychological stress there if you're going with the like buttons. And again, I think it's very sinister, but that's just my own opinion, that it's almost that you're pitted not just against everybody else, but you're pitted against yourself. Like the little rat in the cage, that's what the button is. Tapping the little tapper to get the piece of food. The other factors that cause is lack of exercise. We're not physically working now. I have a stand-up desk here and I try and get out and do physical exercise, but this is limited in terms of every day I have to get physical exercise. But our ancestors were doing physical exercise for 6 or 8 hours daily. They weren't just standing up. But how many people are sitting down all day? So they're sitting down all day, they're talking, eating processed foods, and then maybe they go to a breathing class and the instructor is telling them to take big, full breaths. And in the process, the instructor is targeting the biomechanics but sacrificing the biochemistry. And I'll give you an example. I went in to do an exam back whenever it was, 95, 96. I was pretty stressed going in. I took a 2-minute walk before going into the exam hall. And during the 2-minute walk, I took these full big breaths because I'd read it in a book that this was the way to breathe. Really slow down your breathing and fill your lungs with air. And I was doing that for 2 minutes, and I walked into the exam hall. I was absolutely out of my head. So I was spaced out. Again, there's ideas out there about breathing. There's a lot of nonsense out there about breathing. And I'm not saying that I'm right, but all I'm saying is, if you're going to teach breathing, at least understand some physiology about the breath. Even understand the Bohr effect, which was discovered back in 1904 by the Danish physiologist called Christian Bohr. That carbon dioxide is not just a waste gas, and that it's one factor in the release of oxygen from the red blood cells. So if you have this idea that it's good to bring in as much oxygen as you breathe out as much carbon dioxide as you can, it's not taking into consideration that oxygen is released from the red blood cells in the presence of carbon dioxide. That's the Bohr effect. As carbon dioxide increases, blood pH drops and the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen reduces. So there's many things changing breathing patterns. So how are people breathing? They could be breathing faster than normal, so a faster respiratory rate. They could be breathing greater amplitude, so fuller breaths, bigger breaths. They could be breathing shallow, breathing in the upper chest as opposed to breathing low with good amplitude of the diaphragm. They could have irregular breathing, especially those with panic and anxiety. And they're mouth breathing. And that's not good breathing. That's not how we have or should have breathed throughout our evolution. So our breathing has changed. It's the same. Look around different parts of the world and you'll see some individuals, and they're pretty big individuals. Could you imagine going around Earth 2,000 or 3,000 years ago and seeing somebody that's weighing, I don't know that you're weighing in pounds, but 300 pounds is pretty big, isn't it? Pretty heavy person.
Sure.
Yeah. So do you think 2,000 years ago you would have 10% of the population walking around weighing 300 pounds? No.
Probably too hard to move around this way. Yeah.
So again, it's a modern. So our food has changed. Our breathing has changed.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of people who want to breathe, they've heard that it's right to breathe more through the nose, but they are constricted. They feel like they can't do that, or they're not getting enough air if they do that. You've had some radical solutions like taping radical sounding solutions like taping the mouth shut during sleep. What's your thought about the congested or restricted nose, and how do you think about that?
Yeah, like measure your control pause. So for the adults, they should test how well do they breathe. And they do this by sitting down for about 5 minutes and just having regular breathing and get a timer and take a normal breath in and out of the nose and pinch the nose and time it in seconds until you feel the first definite desire to breathe, and then let go but breathe in through your nose. So it's not the maximum length of breath hold. It's a comfortable length of breath hold. How long can you hold your breath for until the first definite desire to breathe? If a person is prone to nasal congestion, they will continue having nasal congestion until their control pause is a minimum of 20 seconds.
Okay.
So what we want to do then is to avoid nasal congestion, we want to get the control pause higher. The first thing to do is actually switch to nasal breathing all the time. The second thing is to do exercises to help decongest the nose. To decongest the nose, don't do this if you're pregnant or cardiovascular issues or serious ill health, but take a normal breath in through your nose and out through. First of all, you can also test how open or closed your nose is. All you need to do is get your phone. I didn't see my phone is obviously around somewhere. So what you do is you just put your phone underneath your nose and breathe onto the glass and look at the halo that's left behind. So you'll see the halo on the screen. Then take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose and pinch your nose and hold. And walk around holding your breath. And keep walking holding your breath as if you're a kid underwater, swimming underwater. Keep walking holding your breath until you feel a relatively strong air hunger. Then let go, breathe in through your nose. And your nose will start opening up straight away. This is known since 1923. Nothing radical about it, just normal physiology. You hold your breath, carbon dioxide builds up in the blood, and it's probably that and a stress response of holding the breath that helps to decongest the nose. The more you breathe through your nose, the better it works. And then do your physical exercise with the mouth closed. What does the mouth do in terms of the breath? If you were to look at somebody's mouth, is there any function implied with the mouth when it comes to breathing? No. The mouth does nothing. All the mouth is, it's a hole. That's all. And it's a hole whereby air can come straight down the throat. But it does nothing. It doesn't moisten the air. It doesn't regulate volume. It doesn't warm the incoming air. You don't harness nasal nitric oxide. Mouth breathing is connected with the upper chest. Nose breathing is more connected with the diaphragm. Improved amplitude of the diaphragm is important for states of mind. It's also important for people with posture. So, for example, functional movement and functional breathing go together. So the diaphragm provides stabilization for the core and stabilization for the spine. And 50% of people with lower back pain have dysfunctional breathing patterns. They're breathing faster upper chest breathing. So coming back to nose unblocking, get your mouth closed all the time. Do the nose unblocking exercises. Go for a jog with your mouth closed. Yeah, your nose will stream, but continue jogging with the mouth closed. Practice breathing light. Put one hand on your chest, one hand just above your navel, and gently slow down your breathing and breathe less air to the point of air hunger. And expose your body to higher carbon dioxide. And this in turn desensitizes your body's reaction to the accumulation of CO2. And as a result, then your breathing becomes lighter and your nose is less stuffy.
Interesting. So there seems to be this long-standing connection between breath and spirituality. And you mentioned mindfulness and vipassana. In yoga, there's pranayama, right? I studied religions, and there's many practices around the world centered around the breath.
Yes.
So why do you think that is? And how can we bring more of that to the modern world where, people who don't necessarily associate with any particular tradition, what's the core of it?
Yeah, well, in terms of what's the whole essence of spirituality, other to bring a solace for the population. It's not about, I don't think it's about recognizing it's about this superior power or anything like that. It's about bringing a stillness to the mind. It's about connecting with life. We're put on this earth. How many of us actually truly connect with what's going on around us? Or how many of us are literally living stuck in our heads, drowning in thought? So the whole essence of spirituality is about connecting with the life that we were born to live. And we connect with life through our senses, through our sounds, sight, touch, taste, feel. But if we're living in our head, we're totally isolated to what's going on in life. We're either stuck in the past or jumping to the future. So if you were to look at the essence of religion, the essence of religion very much is about, this is only my own opinion, stilling the mind and living life according to your full potential. You will live life according to your full potential when you're out of your head, when you're not immersed in thought. But the essence of religion has been lost. Most certainly it's been lost in the Catholic Church, in my opinion. I have absolutely no wish to go to church because I would get nothing out of it. And while the intentions of religion were fundamentally good, the message has got lost. And the most important message is teaching the population how to live a life and not to live stuck in their heads. It's not about worshipping this superior God. The God is internal, but we can only access that internal God if we can bring a stillness to the mind. So that's my take on it. I can only look at my own life. My own life is so much softer in the last 30 years. It's being very creative, intuitive, enjoying my work and enjoying life and connecting better with others and less stress and happier. And this is ultimately what it's about. And that's why when I'm writing this book at the moment, education has missed it. Religion has missed it. All of the pillars of society has missed it. And the other thing about Aaron, breathing is not for hippies. It's not just for hippies.
Yeah.
Like it has to get into mainstream. So what I would say is, I don't know how I would have got through life only for being able to tap into the breath. That's what I would say. I've no problem saying it has given me a tremendous support that's always being there. And life will always throw a few curveballs. There's always people that will cause trouble. People have different motives. Man is very greedy, is very innate, that they want more and they don't mind screwing people in the process. And you could be doing your best in life, and then you come across this individual who, for financial reasons, wants to suck the life out of you. And we see it. I see it in my field. But being able to focus on the breath has always given me that sense of calm. And it's been really wonderful. Yeah, so I would say to any younger generations, say, look, have a look at it. And I suppose the best thing to do is put it into practice and see what does it do for you. Because listen to your body as opposed to just taking a particular dogma. Breathing has gone a little bit like religion too. That's unfortunate. Get rid of the dogmas. Get rid of the gurus. Get rid of all the nonsense that's associated in the egos. And just look at the breath and just tap into it and ask what's functional breathing, what's not so good breathing. How do you breathe when you get stressed? If you're stressed and your breathing is faster and harder, why not slow down your breathing? Breathe nose, breathe low, breathe slow. So you can have to regulate your states. And then if you want to disrupt or stress the body a little bit, and when I'm talking about stressing the body, a positive stress to cause the body to make adaptations, bring in some breath holds if they're suitable to you. But start off easy and develop your tolerance towards it.
Interesting. I read somewhere that the breath, and I don't know if this is scientific truth, but that the breath is the only bodily function that can be either completely intentional and controlled or completely autonomous and subconscious. And so that it might be this unique meeting place between these two, where if you pay attention to it, it actually helps with the greater harmony. And I'm reading this really interesting book about the two hemispheres of the brain and how they could be sometimes in conflict. There could be different intentions there. There could be different perspectives there. And maybe the breath is a way to reconcile or no.
Yeah, it's in terms of the hemispheres of the brain. I remember reading one report that said if you breathe through your left nostril, it helps activate the right hemisphere. And if you breathe through your right nostril, it activates the left hemisphere. If you want to calm down, block your right nostril and breathe through your left nostril. It has a calming effect. And if you want to have a more excitatory effect, block your left nostril and breathe through your right nostril. Now, apparently those reports were then contradicted in more studies. So I don't fully know, but yogis believed that the hemispheres of the brain could be altered via the breath and via the state, whatever nostril that you're using. I don't think they got it. I really don't. I think the original yoga was really wonderful and tremendous. It was about breathing subtle. It was about breathing slow, about breathing light. But how is yoga taught now in the modern world? Is it taught to be breathing subtle, or has it got lost in translation?
We have power yoga now. We have power yoga. We have hot yoga. We have all these extra hard.
Yeah. But was that the original intent of yoga? The original yogis were scientists. They got it. They understood the human body and mind. But have we lost it?
Yeah, it's a question worth asking. I have one final question that I'd love to wrap this up with. So Alain de Botton, in his TED Talk, talks about the difference between a sermon and a lecture. Where he says a lecture is there to give you a little bit of information, but a sermon is there to change your life. So my question to you is, if I could give you the stage for a short sermon, if there was one thing that could really change people's lives that they could take away with them,
I would simply say what I discovered for my own health, and it wasn't, of course, my discovery, but the information that I came across by chance, it really is about your breathing and connecting with the breath. Breathe through your nose in and out all the time and look at how it improves your sleep. And practice, even if you're doing 15 minutes before bed, that you could be closing your eyes, bringing your attention inwards, but deliberately slow down the speed of the air coming in and out of your nose and breathe imperceptibly to down-regulate. And do it to the point that you feel air hunger and sustain that feeling of air hunger for 3 or 4 minutes. And just see what happens when you actually under-breathe. Forget about all of the nonsense out there about the full, deep breath. Forget about it, it's crap. And I'm not going to say, is there a purpose to some of it? Yes, there is. But I think it's very harmful to say to somebody, I want you to breathe more air. Because if they are already over-breathing, and if they believe that it's good to be breathing more air, it's not going to help them. I made the mistake. I gave you the example, which was a genuine example going into an exam, and it was a final exam. And already as a kid going in, I had a little bit of racing mind, highly strung, poor concentration, and a mind that was all over the place, And I feel for the kids in the school and the university students that there's so much pressure on them to achieve academically, but nobody's teaching them how. Society, as I said at the very start, and education is teaching us how to think, but it's not teaching us how to stop thinking. We need to be able to develop mastery over our own minds. We can do that through the breath, but change the respiratory physiology first. Alter the autonomic nervous system. Don't do what mindfulness says. Don't leave it alone. No, change your breath.
Thank you very much, Patrick. I appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thanks, Aaron.
All right, that's it for today. If you enjoyed the podcast and would like to support it, please consider writing a 5-star review in Apple's podcast app or wherever you're listening. It helps many more people discover the podcast and also makes us feel good. Current support for the podcast comes from my own design company, Remake Labs. We run design sprints all over the world, and our goal is to improve outcomes, whether in business or various organizations, through repeated and rapid design interventions. Now, until next time, be well, everyone. See you next week on Remake.